Johnston. Who knows Henry in the audience?
Everybody.
Almost everybody there. Henry's like, well, I've already given this presentation. I don't know. I think everyone's heard it. And I'm thinking, well,
That's gonna fall
must
off.
have been good. Go back to see it again. Charlene reminded me that I wanted to make sure everyone signed the guest register. And we actually have 3 of our future guest speakers in the audience today. Next month, Charlene and Joanne Iverson are going to be speaking. August, we're going to have Roy Susich giving a compelling presentation on historical buildings and talking about some of the coal miners' I don't know, what do you call it, the lunch pails, the hats, the lanterns, and so it'll be kind of an active presentation where we'll pass stuff around and you can actually touch it and see it. Then Phil, I can't remember, Phil, are you talking about cattle or sheep in the Teanaway Valley?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. And also we just came out with a new brochure on the museums, Kittitas County museums, which is pretty good. We just reproduced that. And there's a nice brochure on the Ronald Rawson Heritage Club, all of their events. And they've been super helpful, kind of helping, Maria Adams has been helping us a lot. So, I don't know, Henry, are you ready to go?
I am ready to roll because I have to be out of here.
Oh, let's get it. He's got to be out of here. All right.
I don't have that far to go. I just got to go to the Catholic Church. So, okay. Well, the last time I wore a headset like this, I was volunteering to call an auction at a funeral director's event, which I found out I can't talk that fast. So, it's nice to see everybody. As I always say, it's nice to see people not at a funeral for a change, since that's where we usually interact. And tonight I'm going to be talking about the history of Roslyn's undertakers. This presentation came about a couple years ago when the funeral home paid to sponsor the showing of the movie My Girl up at the Roslyn Theater. How many of you remember that movie? Dan Aykroyd, and it's about a little girl that's grown up in a funeral home and so on and so forth. It's a perfect capture. The movie's a perfect capture of what being a small town funeral director is like, and I'll talk just a little bit about that later on. But this presentation was put together with the help of Mick Davies Jr., Terry Davies, and some of that family, because they're all about their family history. So it's as accurate as it can be, and it was deemed accurate by Mick Jr. a couple years ago. So just to put that out there. So let me stand where I can see the screen a little better. So let's talk about the early days of funeral service in Roslyn, the early days of funeral service in general. The concept of the funeral home or the funeral parlor or the mortuary did not really come around and become a modern business in terms of you come meet me at the funeral home. That didn't really happen until a little after the turn of the century. So originally, when somebody would pass away, family would send for the undertaker, and if this were me, I'd come out with 2 big totes. I would slip into the back room. I would embalm the body in the back room. It was a lot more rudimentary then. We're talking, by today's standards, we use anywhere from 2.5 to 3 gallons of diluted embalming chemical. In those days, you were using maybe a gallon. But on the flip side, you were having the funeral the next day or the day after. We weren't waiting a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to have a service. And so a lot of folks too also cared for their own at home as well. It wasn't uncommon for a family to gather, bathe the body, build a box, contact the cemetery, take them out, dig a hole, bury them. Okay? So in about 1892, there was a Mr. Foe who operated as an undertaker in Roslyn. He was the one that we figured took care of 45 miners in the explosion of 1892. And it's assumed, though has not been proven, that it was that explosion and that volume of folks that he had to care for that prompted him to build an embalming room and a funeral home as we know it in Roslyn sooner than the rest of the area. So to put it in perspective, in Ellensburg, our funeral home used to operate out of the first floor of the Masonic building up until 1929, before our building was built where we're at now. And a lot of funerals were still done in the home, at the church, that sort of thing. Mr. Foe eventually skipped town. He literally, Larry Davies used to joke that he figured it probably had something to do with a woman. But he left, well, number one, he owed rent. And then number two, he left all of his undertaking equipment behind. And so that is where our story starts, known as Adam and Stoves. How many people recognize those two names? Okay. So when the mine explosion occurred in 1892, Anthony Stoves rethought his career choice of being a miner and decided that he was going to kind of become more of a businessman. Okay? So he partnered with a local businessman by the name of Bill Adam, and they built a large 2-story building in downtown Roslyn, which became known as the Stoves Building. How many of you remember where the Stoves Building used to be? So where the post office is now, empty lot, and then the Stoves Building was there. There was a pharmacy in the front, and then space upstairs for generic lodge meetings, because all the lodges didn't have their own buildings. So they rented that space out. Now, Mr. Foe compiled a small undertaking parlor in the back of the Stoves Building, again, mostly for embalming, storing his hearse, caskets, and other equipment. And then services in Roslyn during that time are actually still very, very much like they are today. They're always at the Catholic Church. It's like they say, you don't have to be of Eastern European descent and Catholic to live in Roslyn, but it definitely helps. So, and so chapel services, as we know them, didn't really become popular until the 1930s when we moved the care of the deceased out of the home into our homes, basically. So, Mr. Foe skips town, owes rent, and so now what do? We got all this equipment in the back of our building, so we meaning Stoves and Adam, they run out, pay their fee, take the test, as it was in those days, and become licensed as funeral director embalmer. Stoves was a funeral director and an embalmer, and Bill Adam was just a funeral director.
Without you two.
Yeah. This was really in the days when you got your certification from a mail order catalog, and we talk about the different education requirements a little later on, but so they continue to operate the mortuary out of the back of the Stoves Building. Now this is where the Stoves and Davies families start to intersect. So Anthony Stoves was married to Eliza Stewart, and they had one daughter, Margaret. Some years later, Anthony Jr., also known as Tony, would be adopted and following the death of Tony Sr.'s sister. Okay, just follow that along. Margaret's the one that really ties us into where we get to with the Roslyn Funeral Home. How many of you have ever seen a picture of Old Man Stoves? I love these pictures because we hear the stories about people and we hear about this history, but we don't ever get to put a face to it. There we go. I think we look pretty close to that. And then this is the Stoves family. Margaret, Tony Jr. So now, Adam and Stoves were like the original entrepreneurs. They had their hands in everything. Okay? Remember, all they wanted to do when they started was run a drugstore. They built the building, wanted to run a drugstore, and wanted to rent the upstairs out for lodge meetings. Okay? Well, now they get stuck with the undertaking parlor. Okay? Interestingly enough, they came to own the telephone company in the same way. This young hotshot comes to town from Portland, starts setting up the phone system in town, running wires, hooking up phones, puts a switchboard in, and then realizes it is probably not going to be that very profitable. He can't pay his rent, leaves the switchboard in the drugstore. He too skips town one night and leaves Adam and Stoves with a half-built phone system in Roslyn. So, for a long time before the business was good enough to employ paid operators, you could only make a call in Roslyn and have it connected if somebody was working at the drugstore counter. That's not how it is anymore today, is it, Doug?
Nope.
No. So I want to talk too just a little bit about Bill Adams' influence on today's funeral customs that we still acknowledge in the Upper County. In 1909, Bill Adams Jr. Died in a hunting accident. And he was a volunteer firefighter with the Roslyn Fire Department, and Bill Sr. was serving as the mayor of Roslyn. Now, Bill Sr. directed the fire department to construct a hose cart that would be appropriate for conveying his son's casket to the cemetery. And that hose cart would be used for funerals until a motorized fire truck came along. And to this day, we still use the 1936 Chevrolet fire engine that the Roslyn Volunteers have to take volunteers, firefighters, to the cemetery. So Carrie Newberry shared this photo with me. This is the old Roslyn Funeral Home, which is now the Roslyn Theater, with the fire truck, and out we come. This was the hose cart picture of Bill Adam Jr.'s funeral. And then this is, I get emotional when I think about this, but that was Gib Rushton's funeral. And Gib was one of the first people I really got to know when I moved to Kittitas County. And we made sure that he went up to the cemetery in the fire truck. Yes?
What is the big building in this, on the hill in the bottom, black and white?
The school.
Is that the school?
It was the old, yeah.
That's where the Catholic Church is now?
No,
No.
that's where the school is now.
Oh.
Or
The high
it's
school
not
was
a
there,
school
and
now, it's Doug's
they
building.
built the current school in 1938.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, how do we move from the Stoves building over to Dakota Avenue where the theater is now? Okay. Early 1900s saw the construction of the mortuary on Dakota, moving the undertaking parlor out of the Stoves building, and introduced the concept of the funeral chapel as we know it today. Okay. And the firm operated under a few different names. So started as Adam and Stoves, then it was known as the Stoves Davies Mortuary. And I can kind of correlate how these dates went. Larry kept good records, but not so good records. I can tell you a lot about every person he cared for, but I can't tell you a lot about the business. And then the Roslyn Funeral Home. So let's talk about my favorite guy, a guy I never actually got a chance to meet. I wish that I could have. His son Terry says that he and I would have hit it off just perfect. We could talk funerals all afternoon. Lawrence Morgan Davies, born in Wilkeson, Washington on March 27, 1900. Spent his early years there before the family moved to Cle Elum. He fudged his date of birth to join the Navy when he was 17 during World War I, and then returned to Cle Elum and graduated high school in 1920. He married Margaret Stoves, and that's how Stoves and Davies came together. Okay? And they moved to Portland where they opened a jewelry store. They had this grand idea. So Larry's family was all jewelers by trade, and he had this grand idea they were going to have this jewelry store in Portland, and they tried everything. They would have sales. Margaret was a very talented piano player, and she'd play the piano out on the sidewalk and try to get people to come in, and it just didn't work. So the fallback after a few years was to come back and go work for his father-in-law as a funeral director. Interestingly enough, he passed, by the time Larry got licensed, the concept of mortuary school had started to evolve. But Larry passed his test without attending any mortuary school. He studied, he took the test, he got his licenses. From everything I've heard in the community, Larry was loved, very well loved by Roslyn in the way he took care of folks. He was also an expert in restorative art. And then he was also very community focused with the way he ran his business. I came across this collection letter in one of his old files. And it says, "Dear Sir, we know you to be fair and honest and that you will understand our position when placed squarely before you. At your request and upon your selection, we furnished all of the services, merchandise, and equipment necessary for the funeral and burial of Mr. J.P. Brown. You assured us that the obligation would be met. There is still a balance due to us of $50. We look to you for payment as our transaction was with you. Then he goes on and says, we trust you, we just need you to pay. A lot of the records indicate too that Larry would still, so say somebody comes in, I do a funeral for him, you stiff me on the bill. Most funeral directors, you try to come back and get us another funeral for you, we're gonna say, hey, pay that one up first, and then we'll talk about the second one. Larry would do these, families would stiff him all the time, and then he would still just go on and do the funeral for him. He did eventually always get paid, from everything I can tell. They took him some time, but he got paid. Now this is a fun one to talk about, which is the funerals and phones. Okay, so when Stoves died in 1932, he left his half of the business to his children, Margaret and Tony. Now I need a pie chart for this, so just bear with me. When Bill Adam died in 36, he left his half of the businesses to Larry, which basically gave Margaret and Larry 75% combined ownership in both the funeral home and the phone company. The other 25% was owned by Tony Jr. Okay? Now Larry continued to try to improve phone service in Roslyn, but was in a never-ending battle with the Public Utilities Commission. He wanted to raise rates so that he could improve the service, but the Public Utilities Commission says, no, you can't raise rates, your service isn't good enough, you got to fix it before we'll let you do it. So it was just this never-ending cycle. So ultimately, Larry and Margaret bought out Tony's remaining 25% of the mortuary and the phone company in the mid-50s. And then they became the sole owners. Tony moved and went on to work in Bellevue to finish out his funeral directing career. And then more months than not, as I found out, the funeral home subsidized the telephone company's operation. Now, the phone company was sold 59 to Harold and Marion Weiss, and would later become Inland Telephone, which is still a family-owned Roslyn business today. So, and I don't think it moved very far from.
No.
So then in 1972, Larry's health is slowing down. He's having some trouble. So he sells the business and assets of the Roslyn Funeral Home to Earl Brown in Cleellum. And Brown consolidated everything down to that funeral home, and then the old mortuary building was converted to a movie house in the late 1970s. Now I've heard stories that there are still people in Roslyn that refuse to go see a movie at the Roslyn Theater. I'm looking at you, Judy. Because that was the funeral home. So then just a little bit of other history for you that's not really tied to Roslyn, but kind of gives you a concept, is the funeral home in Cleellum has been in the same location since the Coleman building was built in 1920. And was originally owned and operated by Seth Coleman, who later sold to Earl Brown. Earl operated the funeral home until '86, when he sold to Paul Cotton in Ellensburg, who was a longtime employee of George and Betty Evenson that had the funeral home in Ellensburg. Consolidated both to Cotton Chapel. And then 1990 to 2022, Cleellum was known as Cascade. Ellensburg was known as Stewart and Williams. And then when I bought them 5 years ago, 5 years ago next month on July 20th, believe it or not, doesn't feel like it's been that long, is when I bought them and changed the name to Johnston and Williams. And so many of you know the Davies family. You know that many of them went on to long and fruitful careers in the funeral business. So, as I said, Tony Stoves worked as a funeral director in Bellevue for the Butterworth Manning Funeral Home. He passed away in 1985. Terry began working at Hill Funeral Home in Puyallup in 1966. He and Lou became owners in '77. They retired in 2018. Terry and Lou's daughter Debbie, she's a fourth generation funeral director. She retired the same time as her folks. Their son David also worked as a funeral director. He has since retired. And then Deborah's daughter, April Ciro, she worked at Hill Funeral Home with the family until they sold. And she took a break from funeral service. She and I are friends on Facebook. She's actually managing a cemetery on the west side now. She jokingly said, it's like The Godfather. Every time you think you're out, they pull you back in. But I have never met, in getting to know these folks, I have never met a family more dedicated to their profession than the Davies family. And I was very honored a couple of years ago when Mick Sr. passed away, that they could have called anybody to take care of him, and they called me. And when we were taking him to the cemetery, we rolled past the old funeral home one more time.
Nice.
Well, this was all set up for when I was talking about it. But the movie My Girl, if you haven't seen it, highly recommend watching it. I think it's on Netflix, Hulu. It's on a lot of the streaming services. If you still have a DVD player, just call me. I have it on DVD. I'll let you borrow it. But the long and short of it is about this little girl. Her dad's a funeral director, and it is the best capture of what it's like to be a small town funeral director. One of the scenes, picture this, they're in the basement. So it's Dan Aykroyd is the owner, Harry Sultanfuss, and he hires Jamie Lee Curtis to be his hairdresser and cosmetician, okay? And he comes down, and she's working on a lady on the table, and she's got her hair all puffed up and eyeliner and everything else, and he goes, "My gosh, who is this?" "Well, that's Mrs. Porter." He says, "Didn't you get the picture I gave you?" And she says, "Yeah, but that picture's outdated. She looks like an old school marm." And he says, "This is the Reverend Porter's wife. She was an old school marm. You need to fix it." And then other things too, where they go out to bingo and they're chatting it up with everybody as they're playing bingo. And Jamie Lee Curtis leans over and says, "Boy, it's packed in here. How'd we get in?" And he says, she says, "I look around and I feel like I'm going to be seeing some of these people very soon." And Dan Aykroyd says, "Yeah, how do you think we got these seats?" But it's a good movie to watch. The sad part is there's a friendship that develops, and her friend dies from a bunch of bee stings. Spoiler alert: the movie's 40 years old. 30-some years old. But it really helps connect because it really helps connect what we do is important, why funerals are important, and why viewings are important. Because Veda gets told that Thomas J. died, and then she doesn't leave her room. She doesn't want to interact. She just can't process the fact that he died. And on the day of his funeral, she looks out the window, she sees the hearse, Dad's out there greeting folks, and she comes downstairs and she sees him in his casket, and she runs up and she starts talking to him and she starts crying, and that's when that moment hits her, so that she was able to really connect the understanding of death, especially at that age. She grew up in a funeral home, but it's hard for kids. Trust me, talk to mine. And then a little bit about me. We're your locally owned and operated funeral home. I love doing guest presentations. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening, and thank you, Michael and crew, for having me. Anybody have any questions?
This may sound a little maudlin, but how do you get the embalming fluid into the body and replace the blood?
It's a very simple semi-surgical procedure. 99% of the time, we just make a small incision on the neck. We raise the right common carotid and the right jugular vein. We use a mechanical pump to go in the artery. Everything else comes back out the vein. Once that's done, we tie it off, stitch it up, and we're good. Yeah.
And that goes all the way down to the tiniest vein?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yep. Anywhere blood's going to go in your body, that's where it's going to go. Yeah.
I just had a comment. I had to smile when you were saying about the makeup and stuff, because my grandma Bessie's house was in that first picture. She lived right by the mortuary.
Oh yeah.
And so Larry was a wonderful guy, and I really wish you would have met him. He was top notch, and so was Margaret. But anyway, he would holler at my grandma. She'd be there working on her roses and stuff. "Bessie, come on over. I don't know if I have enough rouge on her face." We call it blush now, but
Oh, yeah.
in those days it was rouge. And so Grandma would go through the alley and go over and help Larry, so they whoever it was looked perfect. Lots of stories.
Oh yeah. People always ask, they're like, "Well, who does the hair? Who does the makeup?" I don't do hair. Okay. I was one class in mortuary school I couldn't get very good at. So we have somebody come in, but other than that, I do everything else. I do the embalming, I do the dressing, do cosmetics, and everything else. So I actually had a family a couple weeks ago decline viewing because they've come to too many funerals, and they say, and I'm not patting myself on the back, they said, you just do too good of work. We just can't stand seeing Mom that good. Okay? I'll take it, it'll look better, but Any other questions?
So hasn't there been a trend of big Fortune 500 companies coming in and buying these? Is that common in a little town too, or is that just in the big cities?
Well, so yes, there has been. So there's those of you think back So I've been in town, it'll be 8 years in November, and prior to when I first got to town as manager, our funeral homes were owned by a company called Dignity Memorial. Dignity Memorial is the largest death care corporation in the world, okay? Funeral homes across the globe. You gotta go, if you go back to 1998 is when Chris Stewart and Ed Williams, who were truly the last private independent owners of our funeral homes, there was a larger regional corporation called the Hamilton Group that was going around knocking on doors. Now, in 1998, those two funeral homes combined were doing 300 funerals a year, and their cremation rate was like 25%. Okay, so it was a humming operation. Corporation gave Chris and Ed an offer that they couldn't refuse, and if I were in their shoes, I would probably not take it, but I would have to think seriously about how much money they were offering me for my funeral home. And so then from then on, Hamilton got absorbed by a company called Keystone. Keystone got absorbed by Dignity Memorial, and then when I came as manager, I was working for a smaller regional corporation out of Tacoma, and then that's who I bought it from. But yes, that's, the larger the operation, the more you can, it's business. And unfortunately, I don't like the business model that they try to do, which is you can cost share. You can have one centralized accounting department. You can buy your stuff in bulk. You can, but it's just where we're at now. It's our two funeral homes, me, one other full-time, and a handful of part-timers. I mean, we're as small business as you can possibly get. Yes,
Are the numbers changing in the cremation versus burial?
they are.
What does that look like?
So just even in the last 8 years that I've been here, we used to be about 75% cremation, 25% burial. And you gotta keep in mind that we represent 2 out of the 3 funeral homes in the county. The other funeral home in the county is owned by a larger group that has funeral homes going from Wenatchee down to Moxie, okay? And just in the last 8 years, now we're at about 80% cremation, 20% burial. Now, if you were to come in and talk to me and say, which direction should we go, we're thinking about, I'm not gonna push you to a burial, I'm not gonna push you to a cremation. What I'm gonna talk with you about is the importance of ceremony, the importance of viewing, the importance of the time for the community to come together to say goodbye and to celebrate your life, okay? I don't care if we take a big box to the cemetery or a little box to the cemetery, okay? It's the ritual that goes with it. And people say, well, cremations, that's way cheaper. Yes and no. Apples to oranges. If you're gonna have a full funeral with an urn, we're gonna charge the same for our time. It's the merchandise and everything else that goes with it that's gonna be less expensive. Still less expensive than a burial by about half, no matter how you cut it. But we're moving to a disposable society, and I'm trying really hard not to get on my soapbox right now. But we're moving.
Composting.
Well, I'll get to that in a second too. We're getting to a disposable society, and we're getting to a too fast-paced society where we think that if we get the cremation done and we don't do an obit and people just leave me alone, I'll be able to heal faster and I'll be able to move on with my life. That does not work. That absolutely does not work. I always say you gotta do something. Don't do nothing, and it doesn't have to be a big production. It doesn't even have to involve us, but do something. Because everybody's interconnected. Everybody knows people. Everybody has friends. And in the Upper County, I tell you, nobody does funerals in the Upper County better than this community. In terms of turnout, in terms of food, in terms of the whole everything, the sense of community when it comes to funerals up here is phenomenal. Composting,
Yes.
or as the state likes to call it, natural organic reduction. No problem with it. I think have you ever heard of the term greenwashing? So greenwashing is a term that's used, that it gets thrown out when businesses or processes or things of that nature say that they're better for the environment. Oh, we're green, we're better for the environment, okay? So what's the carbon footprint of a burial? Nobody's ever done the research. What's the carbon footprint of a cremation? I can tell you it's a heck of a lot bigger than the carbon footprint of a burial because I'm running that machine for 3 hours at 1,750 degrees, using enough natural gas to heat a home for a month. It takes about $75 in natural gas at Ellensburg natural gas rates. Okay, so let's. So anywhere else it'd be like $30, but it consumes a lot of natural gas, and then we're pumping this exhaust, and all it is gas. I mean, if everything goes the way it's supposed to, the machine doesn't smoke. Okay, not going to say it's never smoked, but if it works the way it's supposed to, all you're doing is off-gassing. But you're off-gassing all sorts of stuff. Natural organic reduction. I'm friends with the folks that own Return Home over in Auburn. Okay? Yeah, it's green, but it's constructed in a warehouse environment where all of the pods, all of the framing, all of the equipment, all of that was sourced from China. The pods are plastic, folks, okay? They have a bunch of big HVAC units out back. So we're running a small Costco in terms of energy use, in terms of heating, cooling, because you're constantly moving air through those. Okay, I'm not blowing their candle out.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, let's call it what it is,
Right.
which is just another way to take care of somebody who's died. It's no better, it's no worse. The carbon footprint is no better or no worse than the other ways that we can handle it.
Interesting. Thank you.
Do you have children?
I have 2 boys.
Would you recommend that they take over the business?
I'm trying. In fact, they've worked a couple funerals with me. My oldest has worked a couple funerals with me up here, and they just can't get over the dead people part. They like the money that comes with it because they spend it faster than I can make it sometimes. So they like that part. They don't like to work for it, but I'm working on them slowly. But that comes with age. I mean, they're 17 and 15. Like, as they get older, I think the younger one, he can, when he helps me with funerals, he's really observant, and I think he can see the interaction and the interpersonal that goes with it, and I think he'd be good at that. But no, I'd love nothing more than for him to take over, but I don't see that happening as of now. So
I'm not familiar with the organic composting. You just let the body rot until.
you accelerate it. So natural organic reduction is, so Return Home is a facility over in Auburn. Take the body over. There's a large pod, so think of a chest freezer twice the size of a chest freezer, the biggest chest freezer, okay? You fill that with straw, alfalfa, wood chips, lay the body in with only organic cotton clothing, so I can't go out in my suit. You can't be embalmed. More wood chips, more alfalfa, more straw, and they put the right amount of air mix to that, and it accelerates. It's amazing how fast the human body goes to work on making itself disappear after your heart stops beating. It just accelerates that process, accelerates the decomposition. After 30 days, that whole batch of everything is processed because your bones are not going to decompose, okay? So all of that is processed, similar to following cremation. After everything is swept, it gets processed further. And then it's put back in another bin, smaller size, think commercial fertilizer container. And then for another 30 days, that continues to percolate. And the byproduct is very nutrient-rich soil, okay? I don't argue with what happens with that. My question is if somebody's gonna go that way, so, Judy, I'm going to pick on you for a second. You're not going to go that way, but what do we do with 1 cubic yard of Judy when we're done? I mean, that's enough to fill the back of my pickup truck. And it's hot, too. Like, you can't take and spread a whole bunch of it out in your garden. It's like super, super, super nutrient rich.
The skeletons then, since what do they, with the natural organic,
Mhm.
what do they do with it? Do they sell the skeletons?
No, that's when I said it gets processed.
Oh,
All
they
of that
do that
material
too.
gets
Okay.
ground up and gets returned into, you would never know that there is bone in the finished product.
It's no less expensive. is
It's
it?
actually more expensive. We offer it, and we've had it on our price list since it became legal and Return Home booted up. And I have to retail it for my time and the fee that they charge me. We have to retail it at $59.95. as compared to a simple direct cremation, which is gonna be around $2,200. And then in between that's gonna be a memorial service and whatnot beyond that. But no, it is in no way less expensive. And again, I'm not trying to blow their candle out, but is it really more green? Nobody knows. Study it, prove it to me. I'm genuinely curious, because at some point, once the facility's online and they've done enough of these to offset the footprint, the carbon footprint of building the facility and everything that went with it initially, yes, they will cross that at some point, but I don't see that happening for a long time.
Got a story for you.
Okay?
About 6th grade, 7th grade, went up to Roslyn. They were selling all the telephones, the crank telephones and the camera. I wanted one of those. Anyway, guy named Dewey Kreitz bought the whole bloody works, and I didn't get it. So here's the cool part of the story. Parked by the freezer shop was Roslyn's first motorized hearse, and it was a massive vehicle, you guys. It was all out of, I don't know, like a cast. And all the curtains and all the posts and everything were cut into this cast. I'm guessing the thing was probably a teens or a 20s vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And what had happened, some guy kept bothering Larry about selling the damn thing, and he finally ticked him off. So he didn't sell it to that guy. He put it on the street alongside the freezer shop and sold it. And he had, I think there was a couple of horse-drawn, but the cool thing was I would kill to have that. It was fantastic.
I would fight you for that.
But if you ever see a picture, anybody, I would love. I remember it, like I say, it was that 6th, 7th grade. This is a lot of years ago. But that thing was ornate. Oh, it was everything in that cast was just carved in.
And that was actually what that was. I can tell you what that was. Is that was actually a piece of wood that had been hand carved. That's how those cars used to be.
Is that? I
Yeah.
didn't touch it, but that's.
That's how
they
those
did
cars
it.
used to be
Yeah.
built.
Wow.
Yeah. Now they're all fiberglass. Believe it or not, our hearse engine is actually only a 4-cylinder turbo. When they told me that, I didn't even think to ask when I ordered it. We got to the factory, I'm like, oh man, what's this got in it, a V8? And Ron's like, no. I'm like, V6? No. I'm like, then what's it got, Ron? Like a snowmobile engine? Like, and he's like, no, it's a 4-cylinder turbo. He says, but if you don't like it by the time you get home, he says, we'll figure something else out for you. I'd be damned if we didn't go 100 miles an hour on the freeway home and not feel it. Like, we were just cruising along, and I looked down, and holy cow. Now, ain't no state trooper gonna pull a hearse over. So we made it home in record time, so.
The cemetery plots, are you involved in selling those?
No. No, cemetery is all separate.
Okay, because I had a cemetery plot question.
Well, I could try to answer it for you.
So, we bought one in 1985 in Woodinville area,
Mm-hmm.
and when I called and said I'd like to sell it, how much are they going for? Yeah, they're going for $2,500, but you can only sell it for what you paid for it, $350.
So that would be
Is that true?
That would be a cemetery rule. Cemeteries are allowed to regulate.
She said it was like a
No.
state.
No, so that would be a cemetery rule. It might be a state law, but I'm not 100% up on the cemetery side. But selling a plot is exceptionally difficult. Usually, what I recommend is reaching out to funeral homes in the area and saying, look, we have a plot. If there's a family in need that wants to do a burial, but they can't afford a plot, talk to us and let's figure something out.
Okay, thank you.
You know, when I was a kid back in the 70s in high school, I did a lot of interviewing with old timers around here. And I read the book, but I can't remember. But anyway, before Seth Coleman had the funeral home here in Clem, we had a look, his name was T.M. Jones. And he had a,
Yep.
you know about it? He had a hook for a right hand because something happened to his right hand. Well, on June 25th, 1918, Clem caught on fire. And he had a body in there, you know, and the fire was right close to the building. And there was a young girl at that time, she was an older lady when I interviewed her, but she said that he threw the body over his back and was running with the hook hanging on.
I've heard that same story. I think Mrs. Tallarico told me that story.
Yeah, 1918, June 25th, yeah. P.M. Jones was his name.
Yep, and he's buried up at Laurel Hill. Second or third section in, right along the road.
I don't know, I've never asked you this before, but A lot of people seem to be like throwing cremains over Peel Point or up at Lake Cleolum or out in the Tanaway or whatever. Is there a state law or anything against that?
No, no. So, Washington, the process that we follow is when a person passes away, we start the death certificate online, and we get all of our information. So all the, where were they born, social security number, education, where did you live, how long you lived there, parents' names, mother's maiden name, yada, yada, yada. We do all of our vital statistic part. Then the doctor does their part, and then we file it with the health department. If we take somebody to the cemetery in a casket, we give a copy of that permit to the cemetery. They fill it out and return it to the health department. If we do the cremation, we fill it out as to when the cremation occurred, return it to the health department, and the state stops tracking it. So I'm not a huge fan of scattering cremated remains whenever possible, mostly because I really wonder, and it might be not an exact example because cremation wasn't as popular as it is now back before Suncadia went in, but I really wonder how many people are out there under the 9th tee box, you know? I really do, because that was all good hunting, hiking, and whatnot, and how many people ended up being scattered out there, and now they're under a house.
Of course, in the old days, it seemed like there was more, as you can see in the Roslyn Cemetery. That was the thing that you did.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's more popular now that, you know, they're spreading their ashes wherever
Yeah.
than it was way back.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah. And Cleolum actually, believe it or not, Cleolum has a very high, what I call going to the cemetery rate. Whether or not it's a casket or an urn, when we conduct a ceremony up here, 99% of the time, we're going to the cemetery with the urn, and we're doing the committal. So, any other questions? I have about 10 more minutes.
I'm sorry for coming in late. Is there gonna be a DVD or something? That
Miles is recording me, so I'll make sure you get the link.
Thank you.
It's gonna be on YouTube, on our, here.
Yep.
If you guys go to the Norman Kittitas County Historical Society website, you'll see a YouTube channel where years of these presentations are recorded. So, yes.
Okay.
I'll email you the link, Doug. I got your email.
Because I came in, was the Roslyn Theater, I know it was a mortuary, was it built as a mortuary?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Originally constructed for that purpose, yes. Any other questions?
Okay, let's give him a big round. I was just thinking on two notes. One is that there's a cool book that Charlene put together in 3 weeks after a board meeting that, I mean, it's just like a coffee table book of the history, great pictures, for sale, $45. It's a fundraiser for the Historic Society, and if you'll notice, there's a donation little container strategically placed on the way out. So I think most of our revenue comes from donations, Charlene, or yeah. So anyway, we hope you enjoyed.
If I've learned anything at funerals, is we don't let anybody leave until that's gone up and down the.
I'll just hold it.
I can sing on Eagle's Wings while we do that.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all for having me. It's been great.
Thank you.